The Battle of the Somme, July 1st, 1916, a day that marked the beginning of one of the deadliest battles in human history. For 141 days, soldiers were thrown into a nightmare of machine guns, artillery, and endless waves of death. Over 1 million men would become casualties for a few miles of shattered ground. By mid-1916, the war had been raging for nearly 2 years, and the Western Front was locked in a deadly stalemate. The British and French High Command planned a massive offensive to break through the heavily fortified German lines along the Somme River. They believed it would bring the war closer to an end. But this plan was tragically flawed. German defences were strong, the terrain unforgiving, and the cost of this battle would be unimaginable. At 7:30 a.m. on July 1st, 1916, whistles echoed across the British lines. Tens of thousands of men were ordered to advance across no man's land. They believed the days of bombardment had wiped out the German defences. They were wrong. German machine guns opened fire, cutting down wave after wave of men. The bombardment had barely scratched their defences. By the end of that first day, nearly 60,000 British soldiers were killed or wounded. It was the worst single day in the history of the British Army. For the soldiers, life in the trenches was nothing short of hell. The mud swallowed their boots, the stench of death filled the air, and rats fed on the remains of the fallen. Days blended into nights, punctuated only by the thunder of artillery and the ever-present fear of death. Diseases like trench foot and dysentery claimed more lives than bullets at times. Men faced constant bombardments, with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, just waiting for the order to go over the top, knowing many wouldn't come back. For over 4 months, the battle raged on. Neither side could gain a decisive advantage. Men charged through no man's land, only to be mowed down. Some took a few yards of ground, only to lose it again in a bloody counterattack. Artillery shells turned the landscape into a desolate moonscape, void of any life but suffering. By October, the fields of the Somme had become a killing field. Over 1 million men on all sides, British, French, and German, were either dead, wounded, or missing. Despite the unimaginable losses, the front lines barely shifted. The Battle of the Somme finally ended on November 18, 1916. But what had been gained? The Allies advanced a mere 6 miles, at the cost of over 1 million lives. It was a battle that symbolized the horrors and futility of trench warfare, where human life seemed to hold little value in the face of military ambition. The survivors returned home, many broken in body and spirit. They called it shell shock, but we now know it as PTSD, a shadow that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The Battle of the Somme is remembered not for its victories, but for its devastating cost. A generation of men lost in the mud and barbed wire, sacrificed for the sake of a few miles of shattered ground. The Somme stands as a brutal reminder of the horrors of war. Over a century later, its lessons still echo. That war, in its most brutal form, is nothing but tragedy. In memory of those who fought and fell in the Battle of the Somme.